Sometimes your auto sampler needs realignment. If the probe gets out of alignment with the sample bath, as we see here in this example, you can see that the probe is a little bit forward and a little bit also a bit to the left. And this video will show us how to realign the auto sampler, the AXS400. If you need to realign the AXS400, you would use a similar procedure with just some minor modifications. The tools that we'll need to use for realigning the auto sampler are over here. We need a ruler, a pencil, Phillips head screwdriver, a 3/16 Allen head wrench, and a 50/1000 inch Allen wrench. Now, for realigning the auto sampler, it's basically a three-part process. The first part we're going to look at is straightening the sample probe. This can sometimes get bent, and sometimes that's all that's really needed to get the auto sampler back into alignment. The other two parts of aligning the auto sampler are to realign the wash bath on the base of the auto sampler, and also then realigning the tray of the auto sampler to the base of the auto sampler. First off, we're going to show you how to straighten the probe. Sometimes this may be the only thing that needs for realignment. So you'll loosen this set screw and slide the probe out, and then be careful not to lose the set screw. We'll set it right there. And take a sight down the probe. You can see that this probe has been bent a bit. So what I'm going to try to do is gently bend that tubing back in the direction to straighten that probe. It'll need a little bit of adjustment both on the long side and the other direction as well. So now this probe looks much straighter than it was before. So we'll go ahead and put it back onto the assembly. We'll need to run it through the set screw again. And take it down and position it just through that hole by about 2 or 3 millimeters with this set screw assembly all the way to the top of the Z-axis. So I've got it through about 2 or 3 centimeters. I'll then go ahead and tighten that screw. And now what I'll do is I'll turn the instrument off and then turn it back on, and it will reset itself. I can then turn the wheel in the back to see how close the probe now is in alignment. You can see that it's still off, and we'll go ahead now and demonstrate how to set the alignment of the wash bath. We're now going to show how to adjust the wash bath so that it is centered, so that the probe is centered in the wash bath. You can see here that the probe is a little bit to the left in going into the center of the wash bath. The first thing we want to do is to measure how far off that probe and what it would take to move it to get it into the center of the wash bath. So with the ruler, I measure from one side of the probe and notice that I need to move about 4 millimeters in this direction. I need to move the probe in that direction, or alternatively I need to move the wash bath in that direction 4 millimeters. Okay, so now we're going to show you how to adjust the wash bath. First of all, I want to turn off the instrument. And I'll raise the probe a little bit from the linkage in the back. Raise it out of the way. I can pull then the mount forward a little bit, and then also slide it a little bit out of the way. We'll then go ahead and move the probe assembly by removing these 2 nylon screws. Set them to the side. Slide the assembly off. Set it to the side. And now I want to pull the wash bath out of position. Slide that up. And actually, you don't have to pull it all the way out. You can leave it somewhat in. We now need to remove the tray. And we need to remove this cover so that we can access the screws on the back of the wash bath. There are 4 screws, one on each corner of the main carriage on the auto sampler. We'll remove all 4. And now we can take this front cover off. And on the back of the front cover, you see the 2 screws that hold on the wash bath. Now I said I had to move this wash bath 4 millimeters in that direction. So I'll take my ruler and measure the top of this mount and see that it comes out to 5.5 centimeters or 55 millimeters from the edge at the top, and also 55 millimeters on the bottom. So I'll loosen those screws, and I've got to then move that wash bath over 4 millimeters. So it'll actually come to 51 millimeters. I'll just move this over 51 millimeters on the top, and to make sure that that wash bath is nice and straight and parallel, I'll make sure that it's both 51 on the bottom and the top. So I've got 51 on both sides. Turn it back over. Tighten the screws. Place the cover back on. And for right now, I'm just going to put on 2 screws to make sure that I have the alignment correct. Come back and put on the other 2 screws. Once we're sure that the alignment is correct, I can then push this down to the bottom so it's in position. And attach the Z-axis on. Sometimes to get the Z-axis mount over this other screw block, you need to lift these inserts a little bit so that they'll slide over there nicely. And I'll put the nylon screws back in. And now I'll turn the instrument on and off to let it center itself, or turn it back on, and check the position of the probe. You can see now that the probe is pretty much centered on the X-axis, but it is still a little bit forward, so we need to adjust it back a little bit. Okay, if the probe is too far forward and we need to push it back a little, what we have to do is take that flag and cut it back a little bit. So you take a pair of cutters and trim off that flag a little bit at a time. Make sure when you trim it that the piece that comes off of that flag does not go into the mechanisms of the auto sampler. If the probe is too far back, what you have to do is you have to extend that flag. And to extend that flag, turn the autosampler off. You'll need to remove the assembly, so pull it back a little bit. Remove these screws. Take your assembly off. And you'll remove this bottom plate, or loosen it actually. So that you have access here to this 50 thousandths Allen head screw, which holds this flag into position. So I'm going to loosen that flag, or that screw, push it all the way in. Make sure it is out to the outside of the block. Tighten that Allen screw. Take this plate, tighten it back up, making sure that the probe is still passing through the hole. And slide it back on into place. We'll then restart the autosampler, let it center itself, and see how close we are into getting the probe back into the middle of the wash cup. And now we've got good clearance all around, and the probe is able to go into the wash cup. Now that we've got the autosampler centered on the wash bath, we may need to center it actually on the sample cups. In this particular case, you see that the alignment is not very good here on the sample cup, and we'll need to make some adjustments. Okay, now we're going to go ahead and adjust the tray with relation to the core here of the autosampler. So I'll turn the autosampler off, and what I'm going to do is disconnect the connections on the back, and I'll need to turn the autosampler such that I can get to the rear of it to make adjustments on the sample tray. So now that I've got the autosampler turned around, I need to pull it to the edge of a table so that I can gain access to the 4 screws that hold the tray to the main core. So what I have here is a 3/16 Allen wrench, which I'll need to loosen the screws. I've got the 4 screws loosened, and now I'm able to make adjustments of the main core on top of the tray of the autosampler. Now to test the adjustment, what I'm going to have to do is hook up the power and the communications back to the autosampler. So I'm going to hook up the serial cable. And the power cable. I'll then get the autosampler ready to position. And what I need to do now is run a 4 corners test on the autosampler so that the probe is sent to each of the 4 corners of the samples, and when they come to those 4 corners, I'm going to need to adjust this carriage to make sure that it fits properly in those 4 tubes. So what we have here is a program on Omnion that sends the autosampler to the 4 corners of this AXS400, which has 90 position trays. If you're using different size trays, you'll need to adjust these sample cup numbers so that it actually goes to those 4 corners. I'm now running the four corners test, and when that probe comes to sample 1, I'm going to adjust the carriage here such that it hits directly in the middle of that sample. I'll then watch it come to cup number 2 and see if I need any further adjustment there. Needs a little bit of a pull back there. Looks fairly centered there, a little bit off. Fairly close. And then now that looks fairly centered on that last cup. So now what I need to do, once this program is stopped, is go back and carefully tighten those screws without moving the carriage from the tray. Once we've got the auto samplers positioned on the sample cups fixed, we want to very carefully slide the auto sampler back without moving the carriage with respect to the tray, and tighten those 4 Allen head screws. We'll then run the 4 corners test one more time to make sure the thing did not go out of misalignment, and make sure that all 4 tubes are hit squarely.